First fruits, the first ripe fruit preceding the rest of the harvest, also called the elect or chosen, as well as the remnant. The first section of the 3 sections in Revelation is the presentation of the first fruits. Why is this? Because they set the stage for what follows after. They are the dough offered as first fruits, the root of the cultivated olive tree. And if these are holy, then the whole lump and branches are too. First fruits. Strong's defines this word as a beginning of sacrifice. When you come to a fruit tree, you do not look for the green or unripe fruit, but for the ripe fruit. When you find it, you remove it from the branch, separating it from its source of life. This happened with Christ on the cross, and perhaps was the reason he cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This happened about the 9th hour, and so we find the word first fruits 9 times in the King James New Testament. Christ, the first fruits. Afterward, those who are Christ at his coming. The word Christ is Christos, defined as anointed, referring to the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God is the Spirit of sacrifice. God is love. All of us know what sacrifice means, but there are 2 forms, involuntary and voluntary. We can be made to sacrifice something, or we can willingly sacrifice it. The Spirit of God is the spirit of self-sacrifice, a willful laying down of one's life. In John 10, Jesus told the Pharisees, "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord." This is the meaning of the cross. This is the message of the cross. Self-denial, laying down one's life. This is the true gospel, for apart from the spirit of self-sacrifice, it is but another spirit and another gospel. How did Paul say it? "Even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed." The Lord's life was not taken from him. He laid it down. It was voluntary. As in, or just like Adam, all of us die. This is our first death, and it is involuntary. It is not a physical death, but a descent into the carnal mind due to our natural man, who does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, nor can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. This explains why Adam, who was not deceived, transgressed the commandment of God. He could not spiritually discern. Our death in Adam is linked to the formation of the self, to the identity we receive from our culture and upbringing in this world. This self is not the problem, but the love of it is. This is why my definition of pride is the inordinate love of the self. Since this is linked to the understanding of sowing to the flesh and reaping corruption, might pride be the law of sin and death in my members? This is the self that Jesus said, deny. It is the laying down of one's life, so it is a second death. This death is voluntary, an act of sacrifice. Not a one-time action, but a continual attitude of putting others first. If anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. To be a first fruit is to become the beginning of sacrifice, so that others may be first. This is the love of the Father and Son. This is the greater love. The first fruits are those who rule with Christ, but it is a rule far removed from the carnal idea of governance. Peter asked the Lord, "See, we have left all and followed you. Therefore, what shall we have?" This is a question from the carnal mind. Nonetheless, Jesus responded, "Assuredly, I say to you that in the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife, or children, or lands, for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold, and inherit aeonian life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first. I may be wrong, but I am inclined to believe that we have been in a regeneration ever since the days of Christ and the apostles. Christ is not coming to sit on his throne. He is already there at the right hand of the Father. Christ is not coming to rule. He is ruling now. And regeneration? Google Gemini states, regeneration can mean the act or process of renewing or restoring something to a better state. Is this not what happens to a seed once it is planted? Doesn't a seed eventually spring out of the ground to become something better than what went into it? Doesn't this one seed eventually become much more fruit and seed than what went into the ground? Might this indicate the results of sacrifice, of being removed from the tree or source of life in order to provide nourishment for others and more seed for planting, that the process might repeat itself in greater fashion? Tradition has long presented the idea that the second death in Revelation is a horrendous thing to be feared. And we are told that the cowardly, faithless, detestable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and liars will all have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Here's the reality. Self-sacrifice is the 180 of the inordinate love of the self. So when we are cowardly or fearful, self-sacrifice brings courage to light. When we are faithless, self-sacrifice brings faith to the forefront. To be cast into the lake of fire or second death is to be cast into the regenerative process that has continually worked since our beginning. So powerful is this lake of fire that it even consumes death and hell. Love never fails. Regeneration is sowing and reaping, resurrection, on both an individual and collective scale, and such is the wisdom of our Father. There is a purpose to all we see, both good and bad, and so we find the one on the throne saying, "Behold, I make all things new." Not all new things, but all things new. Regeneration, restoration, a product and result of many generations. In part 5 of this series, we considered the following from Luke 4 and Isaiah 61. As we know, Jesus stopped at an acceptable year of the Lord, while Isaiah goes on to list the day of vengeance for our Elohim and to comfort all mourners. The day of vengeance points to Luke 21:22, while comfort all mourners aligns with the idea of restoration portrayed by the remnant or firstfruits and their ways and deeds in Ezekiel 14:22 through 23. Here's what we read as Isaiah continues. To comfort all who mourn, to console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. And they shall rebuild the old ruins, they shall raise up the former desolations, and they shall repair the ruined cities, the desolations of many generations. The cycle of sowing and reaping repeats itself over and over, but it is the same cycle every time. The seed must fall into the ground and die, or it remains alone. If it dies, it brings forth much fruit. And so the church, filled with life, fell into the ground and died. It had to. That's the divine pattern, and the reason why Jesus could say, "I know your works." The pattern repeats itself. This is regeneration, and the reason for it is much fruit. Friend, God did not design a system that fails, and His will cannot be trumped by man's so-called free will. God has declared it. The earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Maybe it's just wishful thinking. Maybe I'm deceived. But Paul said that the created things testify of God's eternal power and divine nature. And there is no greater principle than that of sowing and reaping, resurrection, the threefold and regenerative stages of living, death, and life. I will close with the following. I am entreating then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, pleadings, thanksgiving be made for all mankind, for kings and all those being in a superior station, that we may be leading a mild and quiet life in all devoutness and gravity. For this is ideal and welcome in the sight of our Savior, God, who wills that all mankind be saved and come into a realization of the truth.